Journalist Olivia O'Leary wrote a very moving column the other day describing how, as a young reporter, she had once written a series on adoption for the Irish Times. She rang a nun, an admirable woman, who was in charge of an orphanage for girls in Dublin. She told O'Leary how sometimes in the middle of the night a youngster would wake and cry out for her mother. Within minutes, she said, the whole dormitory would be awake, all crying out for their mothers they had never known or could have had no memory of. It is an image which Olivia O'Leary said has always haunted her. Children crying out in the night for their dream of a mother. It's an image that haunts me too, for it was a mother they would never have. Some because they were at an age where adoption was now unlikely to happen, but many more because they were children of legally married parents and could not be adopted. I agree with O'Leary that it is extraordinary that we should have created a legal limbo in which children whose parents could not look after them because of drink or drugs or mental illness or other problems should be forever denied the love of a mother and a father and a family. It seems extraordinary to me that that limbo still exists. Why? Because our Constitution protects the rights of legally married parents, but makes no reference to the individual rights of a child. As somebody who's been adopted myself, I can identify strongly with those children crying out for their mothers. I understand that the longing that children feel to have a mother, a father, a family unit, whether by birth or by adoption. And as Minister for Social Protection, I have committed to introducing legal measures that will help children have their rights under the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. That is to have to know who their parents, mother and father are. And therefore, we're planning to legislate for fathers to be named on children's birth certs. And I'm going to seek government approval to publish the heads of a civil registration bill quite soon. This will provide further amendments to the Civil Registration Act of 2004 in relation to the registration of births and deaths, to validate embassy marriages, civil partnerships, to prevent marriages of convenience, and to make a number of amendments. The bill will implement recommendations of the Law Reform Commission in its report on legal aspects of family relationships, in particular that there should be compulsory registration of fathers and children in the case of non-marital births. This obligation will be modified by the right of the mother not to register the father's particulars where she fears for her own or for her child's safety, and a proposal to allow a mother to effect registration on foot of a statutory declaration that her legal spouse is not the father of her child, thereby making it easier to rebut the legal presumption of paternity where a woman's husband, who is not the father of the child, is uncooperative or perhaps cannot be contacted. I understand, in the context of this debate, some of the comments I've heard, on radio, that some parents fear the knock on the door from the social worker who might take their child away from them. Now, this is emphatically not what this children's referendum is about. I want to stress that. But it is a fear that I understand and that a lot of people have with our complex history of the institutionalisation of children after the famine in Ireland that has a long, long memory in this country, a folk memory, and I think we need to be aware of that and to respect that. I had the good fortune, as I said, to be adopted by a very loving family, and I would wish that option to be made available to other children in care if their birth parents are unable to provide it. But I want to say I do understand that there are fears, about social workers. As a child, I have to confess to being rather thin and a bit weak-looking and so on. And my mother and her friends in the neighbourhood always had this fear that if I didn't eat enough, that I'd be taken back, as the phrase went then. And look at me now, But I think it's important to understand that, because it was institutional powers of very powerful institutions, from the church to local people in authority, including the cruelty man, people from various charitable organisations, people in the judicial system, who put children away into institutions for a very long time. And there is a folk memory of that. And I think it's important that the Minister has set out very clearly that there is an appropriate proportionality in relation to, if you like, powers in relation to the family. Because, of course, the best place for a child to be is to be with their own family, with their own mother and father. But if that is not possible, well then, if the alternative is a child being in an institution, then this constitutional amendment seeks, in fact, to give that child another chance of a loving family if for some reason the first family is not available. And I think we should focus on that, because I know, and I'm sure lots of members of the House do, many foster parents and foster children who would wish at a certain stage, after a successful fostering for a number of years, to have that arrangement actually changed to an adoption relationship with the consent of both the foster parents and the wish and request of the foster child. That's very difficult to do in our current legislation. And remember as well, in a case of fostering, even though the child might be with the foster parents from the time they're a baby or very shortly after being a baby, the social workers still have to consent to all sorts of common things that the people in this House who are parents would be so familiar with, even simple-ish things like trips abroad. So I think we need to understand that this constitutional referendum has a particular purpose in relation to children in long-term foster care of married parents who may either have left and not be available, or who may willingly wish to allow the children to go for adoption. And it is particularly a second chance opportunity for some of those children, and that's very important. This is a referendum which proposes a major and historic change to the Constitution to protect children, support families, and to treat all children equally. It's nearly 20 years since Supreme Court Judge Catherine McGuinness first called for constitutional change of this kind. She made the call in the wake of a case, let's not forget, where a father persistently raped and abused his daughter over a 15-year period. Since then, we've had more reports, 17 in total, detailing abuses in relation to Irish children which took place within the family, the place where the child should be protected most, but in some cases that does not work and it becomes the place of greatest danger. Now, after all of these horrific reports on child protection findings in Ireland, I'm delighted to say that this government is acting and that the Minister has brought forward the referendum. This is a referendum for all children, but in particular for those children most vulnerable and most at risk. We know that the vast majority of children live in loving, caring families and never require this assistance of the state's child protection and welfare services. But we do also know that this is not always the case. Some families do need help and support in parenting their children. This can involve providing help and support to parents by means of family support, including addiction and mental health support and family and individual counselling. This referendum will support this. But in more serious cases, children may be moved from the family and cared for by people other than the parents. Over 85% of non-voluntary admissions to care in 2011 were due to abuse, neglect and serious family problems. I want to recommend the referendum. Obviously, in terms of children, love is the key, comes far before material issues, and this referendum gives for certain children the opportunity to find that love and that cherishing in a second chance for those children. So I recommend this constitution to the House.
Thanks.